International Criminal Court (ICC) has called on world leaders, most especially leaders from its 125 member states and civil society organizations (CSOs), to unite against the President of the United States (US), Donald Trump, following the executive order signed on Thursday by the North American president with plans to impose sanctions on ICC officials over the court arrest warrant issued against Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister, Yoav Gallant, for alleged war crimes in Gaza. This, ICC, in a press release issued few minutes ago, said that President Donald Trump is trying to politicize the international court, harm it, and deny the court the freedom to continue to protest the rights of millions of victims of war crimes and atrocities across the globe. Donald Trump had on Thursday signed an executive order authorizing economic sanctions against the International Criminal Court (ICC). The president accused the ICC of illegitimate and baseless actions, investigations targeting the US and its ally Israel. The Hague had abused its power by issuing an arrest warrant for the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, according to a section of the executive order. The ICC president, Judge Tomoko Akane, on Friday condemned the U.S. executive order and vowed to continue providing justice and hope to millions of innocent victims of atrocities across the world. The UN Human Rights Office said it deeply regretted the U.S. sanctions against the ICC and called for a reversal of the decision. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar on Friday praised Trump for imposing sanctions on the ICC, calling the court's actions against Israel immoral and illegitimate. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will pay his first visit to the Middle East this month, the State Department said late Thursday. Rubio will attend the Munich Security Conference and then visit Israel, the UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia from February 13 through 18. The executive order grants the U.S. president broad powers to impose asset freezes and travel bans against ICC staff and their family members if the U.S. finds that they are involved in efforts to investigate or prosecute citizens of the U.S. and certain allies. The U.S. action against the ICC came in response to the court's decision in November to issue arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his former defense minister Yoav Gallant for alleged war crimes in Gaza. Excerpts of the statement of ICC President Judge Tomoko Akane following the issuance of the U.S. executive order seeking to impose sanctions on the International Criminal Court reads below. I note with deep regret the issuance by the United States of an executive order seeking to impose sanctions on the officials of the International Criminal Court (ICC) harm the court's independence and its impartiality, and deprive millions of innocent victims of atrocities of justice and hope. The ICC is a judicial body which performs functions that align with the interests of the international community by enforcing and promoting universally recognized rules of international law, including the law of armed conflicts and human rights law. As atrocities continue to plague the globe, affecting the lives of millions of innocent children, women and men, the court has become indispensable. It represents the most significant legacy of the immense suffering inflicted on civilians by the world wars, the Holocaust, genocides, violence, and persecutions. When most of the states of the world gathered to draft the Rome Statute, they made the dream of many women and men come true. Today, the ICC is dealing with proceedings arising from different situations across the world, in strict adherence to the provisions of the Rome Statute. The announced executive order is only the latest in a series of unprecedented and escalatory attacks aiming to undermine the court's ability to administer justice in all situations. Such threats and coercive measures constitute serious attacks against the court's state parties, the rule of law-based international order, and millions of victims. The ICC and its officials from all over the world realize daily its judicial mandate to determine whether certain individual conducts, within its legitimate jurisdiction, give rise to responsibility for international crimes. We firmly reject any attempt to influence the independence and the impartiality of the court or to politicize our judicial function. We have and always will comply only with the law, under all circumstances. The ICC stands firmly by its personnel and pledges to continue providing justice and hope to millions of innocent victims of atrocities across the world, in all situations before it, in the sole interest of human dignity. I call upon all those who share the values enshrined in the statute to stand united in the court's defense. Our 125 states parties, civil society and all nations of the world. In what looked like damage control, the U.S. Press Secretary, Caroline Leavitt on Wednesday held a press conference at the White House, trying to clarify the statements her principal, President Donald Trump made in the previous day that the United States will take over the ownership of the land and rebuild Gaza Strip for people all over the world to settle as economic center, with the press secretary making apparent contradicting statements that Donald Trump only meant that Palestinians in Gaza would be transferred temporarily to Egypt, Jordan and other neighboring countries of humanitarian hearts to enable the U.S. rebuild the city before the return of the Palestinian citizens, adding, the U.S. will not pay for the rebuilding of the city in the Middle East that have been in conflict with Israel for decades. According to the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, President Donald Trump has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza, and that the U.S. would not pay to rebuild it. Caroline Leavitt said President Trump's historic proposal for the United States to take over Gaza shows he is an outside-of-the-box thinker, adding that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. When asked by ABC News reporter Mary Bruce if President Trump would remove Palestinians from Gaza by force, Caroline Leavitt said that Trump is prepared to rebuild Gaza for Palestinians and all people in the region, peace-loving people who want real economic development. In a related development, the White House press secretary, Caroline Leavitt said that 461 illegal immigrants, out of more than 8,000 that have been arrested, have been released from federal custody for several reasons including lack of detention availability. Since Tuesday, U.S. officials have continued to defend President Donald Trump's plans that Palestinians in war-shattered Gaza should relocate to neighboring countries, saying, the president was trying to look at the problem realistically, not imposing a solution. Some of the officials stressed that the U.S. wants to work with its Arab partners and Israel to come up with creative solutions to the challenge. 5 Arab foreign ministers and a senior Palestinian official sent a joint letter to U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio on Monday, opposing plans to displace Palestinians from Gaza, according to local media. Trump said the U.S. will be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous, unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the destroyed buildings and create economic development in the area. When asked who he envisions living in Gaza after it is rebuilt, Trump said, the world's people, including Palestinians. Local media reported on Wednesday that the White House faced backlash from U.S. lawmakers and allies who did not support the proposal, many saying Palestinians should be allowed to stay on their land and that it would make tensions in the region worse. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told reporters before his own meeting with Netanyahu that the president was willing to think outside the box, look for new and unique, dynamic ways to solve problems that have felt like they were intractable. We had earlier reported that, on Tuesday, President Donald Trump of the United States, U.S. apparently passed across 2 interesting messages during the press conference held at the White House with the visiting Israel Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying at first that Gaza is a symbol of death and destruction where the people who have been living in the Gaza Strip were living in a miserable existence, hence once rebuilt the people who have fought to keep the Gaza city shouldn't occupy the place again, calling on Egypt, Jordan and other countries of interest to build new domains or new settlements in the neighboring countries for the 1.8 million Palestinians that will be transferred out of Gaza, and by second statement, Trump said US will take over the ownership of the land, rebuild and make Gaza an economic center for people from different parts of the world, including Palestinians, to occupy.
On Gaza, the president has spent basically his entire public career criticizing foreign entanglements, nation building, sending American troops to fight abroad, particularly in the Middle East. This plan seems like it could ultimately involve all of those things. Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza. His administration is going to work with our partners in the region to reconstruct this region. And let me just take a step back here, because this is an out-of-the-box idea. That's who President Trump is. That's why the American people elected him. And his goal is lasting peace in the Middle East for all people in the region. And as I said in my opening remarks, we've had the same people pushing the same solutions to this problem for decades. And it's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
He did not rule out American troops in Gaza last night. Are you doing that now?
I am saying that the president has not committed to that just yet. He has not made that commitment, and you know that.
And on the foreign partners, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis have already panned this plan. What foreign partners, if any, have expressed any interest in being part of it?
Well, the president has said he's been socialing this idea for quite some time. He's been thinking about this. He said in his remarks last night, this was not a decision or an announcement that he takes lightly. And the president has already spoken to the president al-Sisi. In fact, that was his first foreign leader call. He's meeting with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah, next week. He spoke with the King of Bahrain. He spoke with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And he has made it very clear, he's been very vocal, that he expects our partners in the region, particularly Egypt and Jordan, to accept Palestinian refugees temporarily so that we can rebuild their home. I'd like to show you some images of Gaza that were taken. Fox News aired this. I mean, that is, as they put it, in an apocalyptic scene in Gaza. This is an uninhabitable place for human beings. Do you really think that families can live their dream in a region that looks like this, with no running water, no electricity? And the special envoy to the president, Steve Witkoff, recently traveled to Gaza, as you all know. And he came back with images that he showed the president of the dire situation here. And the president made this decision with a humanitarian heart for all people in the region.
The president and you here again today have made clear, given the devastation, you think Palestinians have no choice but to leave Gaza and go elsewhere. But Palestinians say this is their home. They don't want to go. The president last night said he's willing to use the military if necessary. Is the U.S. prepared to remove Palestinians from Gaza by force?
The president is prepared to rebuild Gaza for Palestinians and all people in the region, peace-loving people who want real economic development and opportunity in the region. This is a region that has been controlled by Iranian-backed terrorists, Hamas, who have brutalized not just Israelis but Palestinians too. It is because of Hamas that you see those images on that screen, that Gaza has become a demolition site, because Hamas launched that brutal attack on Israel on October the 7th. And so again, I would stress, President Trump wants to ensure that this can be a place where all people can live in peace. He is a peacemaker in chief. He made that very clear in his first term. And as for how that will be accomplished, the president and his team are talking with our allies in the region to consider next steps.
But should the American people be prepared to see U.S. military on the ground fighting a ground war against Hamas?
Again, the president has not committed to U.S. troops in the region.
But it is an option.
I have.
On Tuesday, President Donald Trump of the United States, U.S. apparently passed across two interesting messages during the press conference held at the White House with the visiting Israel Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, saying at first that Gaza is a symbol of death and destruction, where the people who have been living in the Gaza Strip were living in a miserable existence, hence once rebuilt, the people who have fought to keep the Gaza city shouldn't occupy the place again, calling on Egypt, Jordan and other countries of interest to build new domains or new settlements in the neighboring countries for the 1.8 million Palestinians that will be transferred out of Gaza, and by second statement, Trump said US will take over the ownership of the land, rebuild and make Gaza an economic center for people from different parts of the world, including Palestinians, to occupy. President Donald Trump said that the US would own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs in the area, and added that Gaza could be the Riviera of the Middle East. Also saying that the bonds of friendship and affection between the American and Israeli people have endured for generations, and they are absolutely unbreakable. The US will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too, said President Donald Trump. Hundreds of protesters stood out on Tuesday in the US to demonstrate against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the White House, but they were outraged to hear President Donald Trump talk of the US owning Gaza and forcibly displacing Palestinians. Trump, calling the Gaza Strip a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades, and an unlucky place for a long time, said the area should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it, and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, the president called on countries of interest with humanitarian hearts to build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza. It would be recalled that last month, the Biden administration, with assistance from the Trump transition team, helped secure an ongoing ceasefire between Israel and Hamas that has involved the exchange of hostages and prisoners on both sides. Gazans began returning to the devastated territory in late January, hoping for a permanent ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, who renewed the war in October 2023 when Hamas fighters invaded southern Israel, killing thousands of persons and taking hundreds of Israeli residents and tourists hostage. Israel has since killed an estimated 47,000 people in Gaza in return. President Donald Trump has said that the only reason Palestinians want to return to Gaza is because they have no alternative. But on Tuesday, Trump said the US will be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous, unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, leveling the destroyed buildings and creating economic development in the area. When asked who he envisions living in Gaza after it is rebuilt, Trump said, "The world's people, including Palestinians," stating that the US will take ownership of the land.
I also strongly believe that the Gaza Strip, which has been a symbol of death and destruction for so many decades and so bad for the people anywhere near it, and especially those who live there, and frankly, who's been really very unlucky. It's been very unlucky. It's been an unlucky place for a long time. Being in its presence just has not been good, and it should not go through a process of rebuilding and occupation by the same people that have really stood there and fought for it and lived there and died there and lived a miserable existence there. Instead, we should go to other countries of interest with humanitarian hearts, and there are many of them that want to do this, and build various domains that will ultimately be occupied by the 1.8 million Palestinians living in Gaza, ending the death and destruction and, frankly, bad luck. This can be paid for by neighboring countries of great wealth. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 12. It could be numerous sites, or it could be one large site. But the people will be able to live in comfort and peace, and we'll make sure something really spectacular is done. They're going to have peace. They're not going to be shot at and killed and destroyed like this civilization of wonderful people has had to endure. The only reason the Palestinians want to go back to Gaza is they have no alternative. It's right now a demolition site. This is just a demolition site. Virtually every building is down. They're living under fallen concrete that's very dangerous and very precarious. They instead can occupy all of a beautiful area with homes and safety, and they can live out their lives in peace and harmony instead of having to go back and do it again. The U.S. will take over the Gaza Strip, and we will do a job with it, too. We'll own it and be responsible for dismantling all of the dangerous unexploded bombs and other weapons on the site, level the site and get rid of the destroyed buildings, level it out, create an economic development that will supply unlimited numbers of jobs and housing for the people of the area. Do a real job, do something different. Just can't go back. If you go back, it's going to end up the same way it has for.
You are talking tonight about the United States taking over a sovereign territory. What authority would allow you to do that? Are you talking about a permanent occupation there? Redevelopment? And Mr. Prime Minister, do you see this idea as a way to expand the boundaries of Israel and to have a longer peace, even though the Israeli people know how important that land is to you and your citizens, just as the space is inherited by the Palestinians as well?
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East and maybe the entire Middle East. And everybody I've spoken to, this was not a decision made lightly. Everybody I've spoken to loves the idea of the United States owning that piece of land, developing and creating thousands of jobs with something that will be magnificent in a really magnificent area that nobody would know. Nobody can look because all they see is death and destruction and rubble and demolished buildings falling all over. It's just a terrible sight. I've studied it. I've studied this very closely over a lot of months, and I've seen it from every different angle, and it's a very, very dangerous place to be, and it's only going to get worse. And I think this is an idea that's gotten tremendous, and I'm talking about from the highest level of leadership, gotten tremendous praise. And if the United States can help to bring stability and peace in the Middle East, we'll do that. Bibi?
I mentioned again tonight our three goals, and the third goal is to make sure that Gaza never poses a threat to Israel again. President Trump is taking it to a much higher level. He sees a different future for that piece of land that has been the focus of so much terrorism, so many attacks against us, so many trials and so many tribulations. He has a different idea. And I think it's worth paying attention to this. We're talking about it. He's exploring it with his people, with his staff. I think it's something that could change history. And it's worthwhile, really.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.